sexy on secular sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that knows that if soulmates exist, they are found, but made. I'm Christy Powell, my co-host tonight, who I'm so grateful to for stepping in last week. Welcome, Rudy B.
Hi, how is everybody tonight?
And our guest tonight is everyone's favorite autonomous atheist and relationship coach, Marie Delafont.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, this is the part where I'm supposed to say words, right? So tonight we're going to be talking, obviously, as Christy already talked about soulmates, and more specifically, black and white thinking within relationships, and hopefully leaving that kind of thinking behind. So if you want to talk to us about that or about any other secular sexual topic, please call the show at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/call-sex.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get this out of the way before we already start to lose viewers. I feel like it's pretty clear between the three of us that we all agree that the soul, let alone the idea of soul mates, or any other notion of like a one and only perfect partner is pretty much bullshit. And we're going to dissect that a little bit, but I guess I wanted to start by checking in with the two of you to see how embedded was this idea for you? Was this something that you really grew up with or really believed intentionally or unintentionally at various points in life?
For me, I don't think I was fed soulmate by like the culture that I grew up in terms of like religion. I think within Christianity, we knew that soulmate was ridiculous. It was more God's chosen person for you. So it was the same thing, but described differently. They kind of appropriated that way. But culture definitely was telling me there was such thing as a soulmate, and such that like I didn't even date in high school because I was just expecting Jesus to kind of like hook me up with my God ordained partner. But I ended up marrying someone that I divorced 5 years later. And at that point I was like, oh, okay, so I was wrong and I thought that I was right. And so that really started my serious unwinding of the idea of a perfect partner, or even of assuming that there would be a lifelong relationship.
Really, that is uncomfortably close to my story. I resonate with so much of that, Marie. Rudy, what was your experience, particularly in the JW community?
Yeah, funny enough, Jehovah's Witnesses are very anti God has a plan for you and your life specifically, and it's all laid out already. I mean, they believe that he's gonna make things happen the way, he wants it to happen, however that ends up being, but they don't think of it as a plan. So soulmates were never really a thing that I was brought up with the concept of. In fact, I was kind of brought up with the opposite. I had the idea that I could marry literally any Jehovah's Witness man and make that relationship work, as long as we were both very spiritual people and that we were both focused on, Jehovah, on our ministry, all of that stuff. I was convinced of pretty much the opposite. Still pretty detrimental belief, though.
Yeah, well, we're going to definitely get into it a little bit, but I'll be very curious to learn, I don't know, what the consequences of the other side of that coin are, and what that really looks like. For now, I've seen The Good Place, I've seen What Dreams May Come, and all of these different movies that kind of explore this idea, but soulmates isn't explicitly in the Bible. Marie, you already kind of pointed out how you can get there and then maybe take the ideas of like predestination and God's perfect will for your life and all of this, and I guess eventually get to like a Hallmark version. But I guess I'm curious where the notion of soulmates even comes from for y'all, or where you imagine that seeped into our culture.
Well, can I just like pull a hypothesis out of my ass that I literally just thought of 20 seconds ago?
That's my favorite kind.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Buckle in. So here's my thought. what I'm exploring personally is the idea of, and I know these words are going to sound all wooey and shit, but it's Jungian psychology, the idea of having a shadow. And another way to put that is just like these hurt parts of ourselves in childhood that we never really got addressed. And I think the hypothesis that I'm developing is that we project this hurt, shadowed part of ourselves onto other people. And that's a pretty well-known thing, that whatever happens in your childhood with your parental situation, you typically project your unmet needs onto all future partners. And so I think that soulmates is our messy human way of trying to heal that shadowed, hurt part of ourselves. And so since there is no soulmate, and since people can't actually heal the wounds deep inside of you just by existing and being your partner, I think that a fantastic way is to deconstruct the whole idea of a soulmate, deconstruct the whole idea that someone is going to fulfill you, that's going to complement you, that's going to heal all of your wounds. And now I use partners, you know what I mean? But partners are a tool at times for me to see myself and to see my hurt. So oftentimes, many times when I get upset or I feel really uncomfortable, case to case basis, it sometimes is about me and about some unhealed, unrecognized trauma or some kind of unchecked thought process that developed through whatever kind of hurt that I experienced as a child. So that is my out of the ass hypothesis that I conjured 2 minutes ago now.
Yeah, okay, so you stole parts of my life story, and now I'm a little bit convinced that you're reading from my unpublished manuscript right now. Because I do think that there's a real piece to that there, that we seek relationships, we seek co-regulation as a way of meeting our own needs, of trying to find a little bit of balance and something to soothe maybe the pieces of ourselves that aren't being satisfied, particularly the pieces that we grew up with. And I think that the real crux of this, though, comes down to basically seeing what we want to see in somebody, that kind of black and white thinking of, well, I love this person, therefore they must be perfect. And somebody who's perfect must have all of these criteria that helps meet all of my needs, which, you know, it just misses out on the fact that people don't fit in boxes, and that there are no, you know, perfect ones and zeros. I don't know. Rudy, what do you think?
Sort of piggybacking off what you've said, what both of you have said, it occurs to me that when people are talking about their soulmates, they're not talking about how they fit into that person's life perfectly. It's usually the other way around. They feel like their needs are being met. They're not usually necessarily thinking about how they are perfectly meeting the other person's needs in return. And I guess that they imagine that they do, but, you know, unless both people think that, that's not really necessarily mutual. But yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying, the ideas you're putting out there. It definitely does seem like something that you're kind of like a hole you're trying to fill, this idea that there's somebody who is perfectly going to be able to take care of all your needs. It's an unrealistic desire, but it's a very human one.
Yeah, you know, even if we as atheists and skeptics are able to dismiss this sort of like magical idea of the soul and this like soul bond connection and all of that, I feel like the idea of a perfect partner or a, you know, perfectly shaped puzzle piece or just the right, you know, Tetris piece that's going to come in and make everything complete is still really persistent. And I think in some ways unexamined in our culture writ large, including the atheist community. I mean, do you guys see this showing up either in your own relationships or just in the conversations that you have with others?
Yes. Yes. Like I've had several partners over the years, and it's really illuminated to me a very subliminal, subconscious narrative inside of me of the idea of a perfect partner, even though intellectually I've let go of that, but inside of me I still still act that out when I get a new partner and I'm with them and I'm like projecting all the good onto them, all of the bad onto them. And when the bad happens, then I'm like, oh, this is a trash relationship. When the good happens, I'm like, this is the perfect relationship. And it's really helped me over the more partners I have, the more I learn about this, that it's just taking someone as they are and just allowing them to be who they are. And I think the biggest change that I've made in approaching relationships over the years is to approach it with curiosity. In the past, I've just sat down at that bar stool and started making a list in my head about all the things that bothered me about that person, about all the things that I liked, all the things that I were like, just waiting to be like, oh, he said this, clearly he's this way, fuck him, whatever. But now I've started to approach dating with a lot more curiosity of like, I know I'm okay. I know I'm okay as I am. And I'm going to show up and see how this person is. Not to say, they're broken, they're not broken, they've got shit, they don't got shit. They're just as whole and complex as I am, and they're neither perfect nor evil. And then, I'm getting ahead of us, but like, then the task is to let the relationship unfold as it is without any destination in mind. And then just allowing yourself to decide whether you like how it's unfolding. So you let it create itself instead of trying to smash someone into this cookie cutter. Because even if you don't believe in marriage, even if you don't believe in monogamy, we are projecting our stuff onto these partners and trying to get them to fit around us. And when we can release that, you can enter into relationships that you didn't think you might be in before that really challenge how you see yourself, because relationships are a fantastic way for you to really see who you are, because you have to juxtapose yourself against who they are. And you either blame them and break up with them, or you can wonder, if this has something to teach you about who you are and how you navigate the world and you see the world.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far ahead of us at all. I think you're right on track. I feel like if I could pull just one thing out of all of my experiences of doing like relationship counseling or particularly like dating coaching with former evangelicals and folks in the atheist community, it is the remarkable prevalence, not just of purity culture and a lot of these religious ideals, but of this sort of I kiss dating goodbye courtship type of mentality, something that really emphasizes the idea that you go on a date the same way you go on like a job interview, and you're like checking down boxes and making sure that somebody passes muster. And it's not a bad idea to ask yourself the question, do I want to go on a second date with this person? But I feel like we go through all of these check forms over the course of like the first 3 months of dating. And once somebody gets across those hurdles, whether we mean to or not, there's this switch that kind of goes off in our head that goes, okay, I'm going to move this person from like gray and undecided to white. They're in the good side. And our black and white thinking, our kind of like soulmate ideal, is because this like test is being passed rather than something a little bit more organic, something that is a gradual progression of a relationship in a number of different directions. It instead becomes, are we able to get past a certain finish line or hit certain milestones on the relationship escalator? Does that resonate for the two of y'all?
Yeah, I definitely, I remember having a lot of those kind of thoughts when I first started dating my now fiance. Basically, we had an amazing first date, and from then on, I was just like, "Yep, this is it. This is this. I don't know if I need anything else." I'd been in a polyamorous relationship before dating him, and pretty much as soon as we started dating, I was like, I never need to have a polyamorous relationship again because this person fills literally all of my needs. And that's not true. And that's not even a slight against him. That's just unrealistic and silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes me think of my partner that I'm married to and have been with for, well, I can't do math, but it's a little bit over 10 years now. 10 years ago, I was a very different person. So I met him and I didn't believe in soulmates, but I felt really safe with him. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the new guy. This is the new husband. Like, maybe we'll divorce. And I've always said, like, I will divorce you at the drop of a set. Like, I will divorce you. It's easy. I will do it. But he was someone incredibly important and special for me 11 years ago and has been over the years. But our connection and the way that we are important to each other has changed over time. And so if I said to myself, oh, he's this perfect match for me back in 2010, and now I'm sitting here saying he's still a really good match for me, but for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And so he and I now, it's almost a daily choice that we're going to continue to be in this relationship, not because we've told ourselves after 3 months of dating that this is it for me, but it's after 11 years, we're asking ourselves, do we like how this relationship is today? Because if we were soulmates 11 years ago, does that mean we're still soulmates now? I changed a lot. He's changed a lot. So do soulmates morph and shift? And if they do, they're not really soulmates, right? And so it's really just a matter of presence and engagement in your relationship and noticing how the relationship shifts and the connection shifts and what you have in common can change, and expecting that, allowing that, reassessing as time goes on instead of just committing to something and then that's it. And so when things do change, you might freak out a little bit if you think that that's how it's supposed to be for the rest of your life, and you don't give yourself a chance to try something different, to reevaluate it, to ask yourself, is this still a good fit?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely something that my partner and I have discussed. I mean, pretty early on in our decision to get married. We're still not married. We've been together for like 3-4 years, something like that, but we're not married. And we both were like, yeah, I mean, we're going to get married, but like, if things don't work out, we could just get a divorce. Like, we've both agreed well ahead of time, long before we've even gotten married, that staying married is not, getting married doesn't mean the end all be all of the evolution of our relationship. Like, that's not like, it's not just, and they lived happily ever after. Like, there's stuff after the getting married part, which is something that we've both acknowledged, because we've already, as you said, grown and changed a lot during the course of our relationship. Why would anybody think that growing and changing would just stop at a certain point in that relationship and it would just be the same forever? Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Well, I appreciate these ideas of opting in, of choosing every day that this is a relationship that you want to be in and making space for it to grow and reassessing and everything else. But I feel like it brings up a pretty natural question. So before I let Rudy jump onto the phones with us, I guess I have to ask, if our partners are neither like ones or zeros, and we no longer see this as like a locked in done deal and something that we have to be responsible to check in and make a decision on a daily basis, how do we make a rational determination about whether or not this is a relationship we want to stay in? I know that's an unanswerable question in a lot of ways, but
I have an answer.
Oh, okay, well, I mean, I guess I should have expected. I guess that's totally fair. But I know that that's a question that I mull over a lot. Is like, marriage for me was permission to no longer have to like meet that existential obligation of checking in and deciding to opt in. And, I regret those ideas, and I've come to something a little bit more sophisticated, but I still wonder, if you want to be here, but there is no eternal vow, there is no perfect connection, How do you make that determination?
Well, first you need to let go of the fear.
Mm.
I just want to admit that us letting go of the idea of soulmates, or even this unspeakable word that maybe secular people hold on to subliminally, letting go of that is scary because we have been trained to believe in this life partner, soulmate, let's hope that we can die together kind of thing. And if we're talking about letting that go, that's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to admit that. And that's something that I've had to face as my relationships have evolved and my life has evolved. I've had to look that in the face and say that I can't expect anyone to be glued to me forever. That is just not how life works. And so almost for me, it was an existential step to accept chaos, even in relationships, even in profound love, that people change, relationships end, people die, people break up, people divorce. And to go into relationships knowing that it's just absurd that we're alive in the first place and allowing the chaos to just be, and allowing every moment that you have with love for yourself in the moment and love for anyone else in the moment is enough. And to stop trying to control internally and this expectation and hope that you will be loved by the same person, or at least be loved by someone as you're dying. You know, like, isn't that what we're kind of talking about? Like, we're talking about fear of being alone. And so if we can address that, if we can look that in the eyes, then I would say, you know, the next step is, at least for me, let's discuss it, right? But the next step for me is finding partners who are capable of conversations about the actual relationship. Like, who are interested in talking about the dynamic, and they're not just trying to go out just partying all the time or just doing life together, but are actually talking about, is this working? Do we like this? Here's something I'm noticing. Let's talk through it. Those are the partners that I look for. And even those partners have broken up with me because life is chaos and people are people and they have unique needs. And so you take risks. You do take risks connecting with people and not expecting them to stick around and not demanding that they go on the escalator relationship with you. So I just look for people who are honest and who I know that when and if they break up with me, they will do it with love and compassion and transparency. And that helps for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate those ideas around sort of embracing impermanence and radical acceptance. And I think a important or necessary element there is the trust in yourself and the people around you, that whatever happens in this relationship, even if it is going to end, being able to trust that you'll be able to endure that you're capable of surviving, takes a lot of pressure off of the relationship to be perfect right now, because you don't necessarily see every flaw as a, potential disaster, as, proof that the thing is going to eventually destroy you.
Yeah. And just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it wasn't worth it. I had a relationship for about 5 months in 2019 that I didn't want to end, and it did. And I am so grateful for that time that I had. I'm not upset just that it ended, in the fact that it ended, it made it a failure, or made any of the good moments that we had together, or any of the things that I learned about myself somehow trash. Like, I still carry that with me. It was 5 months of a very intimate relationship that was a gift to me and my growth and my path, and I carry it with me. Why would I want to discard that? Like, why would I not want that in favor of seeking out this soulmate stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a beautiful idea. I just want to echo before I turn it over to Rudy for anything last to add, and before jumping on the phones. I really just want to repeat what you said about the fact that a relationship ending doesn't mean that it was a failure. Like I mentioned the checklist, and sort of this idea of seeing dating as a filtering process, like a way of seeing, like, is somebody worth it? as opposed to moving to a place where you're able to enjoy it for what it is, rather than seeing it as the one or somebody who's going to be with you for your whole life. A relationship doesn't last until both people die in order to be a success.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that, all of those sentiments. I feel like I'm spending a lot of this show just being like, yeah, you guys are right. But no, really, I mean, when I think back on past relationships, of course, my mentality at the time was always like, is this going to work out? Is this going to work out? But then looking back, it's like, yeah, but they were nice. Like, was it bad? Like, just because it's ended. And I think that the real tragedy, like a failed relationship, is a relationship where you're staying in it and you both hate it. That sounds like a failure to me.
Yeah,
Yes.
100% on that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot more to cover, but if you're ready, Rudy, let's jump on the phones for a bit.
Yeah. First, let's talk to Alan in California. Wants to talk about exploring his sexuality and is curious if he counts as bisexual. Alan, you are on with Rudy, Christy, and Marie. How are you?
I'm good. How are all of you?
Doing
Pretty
great, thank
good.
you.
Good. So make no mistake, it's not like I feel that I need to have a label or that I'm like ashamed of anything. I'm just kind of curious to hear what other people think because, like I mentioned in the last time I called, I discovered that I was attracted to a man when I saw him on YouTube. However, when I look at other men, it doesn't do it for me. I'm just not into it. But for him, I am. However, some people refer to him as, I don't know if this is a derogatory term, but they refer to him as like a femboy. He's very effeminate and very just cutesy in the way he behaves, which I adore. And right now he's actually a she. She's transitioning. But the thing is, I'm thinking to myself, well, there's only this one guy I'm attracted to. And there's a male actor I saw in a movie that I had to watch for class who played the role of like a effeminate minstrel. And I found him attractive. So I'm like, are these two just the exception to the rule and I'm still technically hetero? Or does that count as bisexual or not? I'm just not sure. I'm kind of curious for your perspective.
Yeah, well,
Well,
we can parse out the language a little bit, but I really want to start by just checking in if you are describing this this YouTuber incorrectly or if I misunderstood, because I was under the impression that this was somebody who was a cis male and you were having kind of this conversation with yourself about whether or not you were attracted to a cis male. But if they are, or if she is a trans woman, then that's a very different conversation. So what was that point?
She is transitioning now, but when I first looked at her, it was during the time when she was still very much
very much presenting
and I was
cis.
still-
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you for the correction. Yeah, I was still attracted to him. And part of me for that word, it was in reference to a Korean film about entertainers back then in like the old period of Korea. So my apologies for that one.
Yeah, well, no, I think femboy is a non-derogatory term. I don't want to be the arbiter of that, but I do
love
think
the
that's an
term
appropriate term
femboy
when it's
to
appropriate.
describe myself. I'll just say that. I love using
Yeah.
that term.
Sure. Well, what do y'all think as we're parsing this out and playing the linguistics game?
Marie, did you have thoughts you wanted to start with, or?
Well, I mean, anything that I have is just, it's all from my point of view, which is limited, and I think I'm undereducated on the topic, but my immediate thought, and I hope my hosts will supplement with whatever thoughts they have, is that it's up to you to decide if that label makes sense to you. It's something that for example, something I've been wondering for maybe a year or two now is, am I non-binary? Do I want to use they, them pronouns? And I asked Fee Bianca about it one time, and they told me that they hadn't really felt any dissonance around, the she, her label until they tried using they, them for a while, just to see how it felt. And they just said that it felt so much better. And so what that taught me is just to explore and just notice how you feel if you start saying, maybe I'm bisexual, and you tell someone you're bisexual, and then they describe you bisexual. How does it feel? Does that make sense to you? Does that align to you? Or you could dive deeper and get really into those descriptive labels of, and I can't even think of examples, but like, heterosexual, sometimes femboy liking such and such, you know what I mean? Like you can really just start to make your label just a beautiful paragraph if you want. Who the fuck cares? So like, I'm just all about like, it's play. You don't need to fit yourself inside a box. I think labels are helpful to help you find understanding about yourself, but to be playful with it and give yourself permission.
Yeah. I would definitely piggyback off of that and say that I changed one of my own labels very recently because after living with it for a while and thinking about others, I was like, I liked that one. It worked for me at the time, but I kind of feel like this might be a better description now that I have called myself that and felt my way through it. And now I'm like, I don't feel like gender fluid is quite the right term for me. Gender queer is probably a better descriptor. I feel more comfortable in that. And I have changed the label that I used from bisexual to pansexual at different times in my life. So like this isn't a decision that you have to make, and it's like, all right, that's it. I guess
Locked
that
in.
I can never not say that I'm bi now that I've started calling myself bi or whatever term you end up on. There's ones that get real specific, like Marie said, and it's for some people it's easier to just describe their sexuality than put a word on it, because for some people it's very specific. Maybe you're just attracted to feminine people, whether or not they no matter what parts they may or may not have, it's a certain cultural perception of femininity that you're attracted to. Who knows?
Right.
And that's your thing to play with and figure out.
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, I understand that femininity is kind of a subjective word because I'm actually a communications major and we're kind of going over that in my classes right now.
Sure.
Well, that gave me a lot to think of. Was there anything else you want to say or ask?
Yeah, I think I would just point out again that you do get to make this choice, that these labels are not medical diagnoses. They are not going to be written on your indelible chart, and you get to play around with them. Nobody in the bisexual community, at least nobody that speaks for me, is going to be telling you you're not allowed to use these terms. As you're shopping around and looking for things that feel comfortable, you might find that heteroflexible is a word that may describe you. You might find something like the word cockhound is more appropriate for you, just depending on how you see this side of yourself. Or it may be very much the case that you are a largely straight man who was attracted to a woman without realizing it at the time. So those are all very difficult and nebulous ideas to ever be able to kind of like lock down. And so that's why I say these labels are great if they bring a sense of community, if they encourage a strong sense of identity or allow you to feel seen. But they're really not vital, and they're going to be imperfect no matter how you slice them. No matter what you do, there is no adjective that's ever going to encapsulate you. And so it's okay to have a little bit of ish and a little bit of squish in all of your adjectives. Beyond that, I'll tell you, we did an episode this past summer about poly-Viking power bottoms and other, strings of adjectives. So I'll make sure to drop a link to that episode in the show notes for this one, because that may help answer some of these questions in a little more detail.
That does sound great. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you guys. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, well, I hope that answered your question. And it was great to get to talk to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you Yeah, I appreciate you guys taking my call. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yep.
you have a great night.
All right. Bye.
You too.
Hey, you want to hit one more before we jump back into the interview?
Yeah. Let's get one of our callers who has been waiting for almost an hour and a half now. John in New York. He wants to talk to us about a government program. Oop. Can you hear us?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes,
Oh,
I
I was-
can hear you.
Yeah, I was just talking about what your question is, but you might as well tell us yourself what your question is.
Oh, well, basically, I mean, this might be out there, but I was like, I had this idea of like, and I was wondering what you guys would think about it. Like, how would it sound for a government-sponsored program, that helps, that provides sexual health services to people with mental health or other disabilities, almost like a sexual surrogate type of thing, exploring sexuality through a controlled environment, but the government is, sort of the, I mean, it's a tough thing to explain, but I don't think it's ever been tried. Well, I know sexual surrogacy is a thing, but I'm not sure, it's not funded by insurance or anything. I know that. So I was just wondering your guys' opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, and John, let me ask you to take us off a speakerphone if you have us there, just to clear the audio up a little bit. But I guess my
okay.
Sure. Well, my best answer to your question is to say that there are honestly thousands of different government programs around mental health and around sexuality, but they're vastly inadequate in many, many, many ways. The sexual surrogacy programs that you're talking about, to my knowledge, are almost entirely, if not entirely, defunct and no longer something that is really offered. It was only ever offered, to my knowledge, on a very limited basis in a couple of West Coast states. And I could be wrong. I'd love for the internet to correct me in some fashion. But to my knowledge, those programs are all shut down. And while I think that there is remarkable value to them, I don't see that changing in any kind of meaningful way. We talked recently to Alice Little about sort of the state of prostitution in this country. And while I recognize that that's not exactly the same thing, the appetite and maybe the tide in the direction of legislation right now doesn't give me any meaningful hope that type of treatment or that type of public option is ever really going to be available in our lifetimes. I'd love to be proved wrong. So I hope that points things in the right direction. Did you have any clarifiers or anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, the only reason I brought it up was because, I remember I saw this documentary of there was this intersex man, and he basically wanted. I think he identified as a male, but he was intersex, and basically he wanted a partner, a woman partner, but they would never give him a chance. Like all the women he tried to date, they would turn him down, and he remained a virgin. And I think he's still a virgin up to his 51st birth. He's like 51 or something now, and I don't know. Like it's kind of, I feel it's kind of sad. What other options? I mean, you can't force anyone to love them, but it's kind of sad, I feel.
I have two thoughts on this. One is, I agree with Christy that I don't think that there's any immediate future where any kind of sex work or whatever is anywhere near legalized. Fuck, we haven't even legalized marijuana yet, and everyone uses that. But I would say that one thing is to support sex workers. I know that it's not likely to be legal at any point, but make it clear, make it public, make it vocal that you support sex workers, stop making jokes about hookers, that kind of thing. Get yourself aligned, get active, talk about it, share about it. advocate for those folks who know that this is important. And secondly, I just want to validate what you're talking about as someone who has a history of sexual repression and just a really shitty history with sexuality. There were points in my life where I wished that I could hire someone too, someone that I could talk things through, someone that I was literally paying to help me work through my fear of control, my fear of communication, someone that, that was safe to do that with. And I wished that I would have had that. And that was just not a choice. It was nothing that I was made aware of. And so at the very least, I want to validate this. This is a situation for some people. And I feel you. Like that is an emotional sexual issue that we should have holistic services for. And I don't know when and how that would ever happen, but I just want to validate that for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much. Do I hang up the call, or do I get put back in the queue, or?
I got that end of things. Don't worry about it. But thank you so much for calling, John. It was a interesting discussion. Have a good night.
Rudy's got you in good hands.
You
Thanks so
too.
much. Take care, John.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like, even as a sex worker, I've never really thought of that but it is an important avenue that I've never even really thought about it. But yeah, the only way that would ever happen is if we validate and legalize sex work now. But yeah, that's not happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually had a really lovely conversation the first time we spoke with Alice Little, where she talked about not the idea that prostitution is therapy, and I want to be mindful of our word choice here, but of the therapeutic implications of having the opportunity to pay for that physical connection and that intimacy and the real value to all of that. So I'd love to live in a very different world. With FOSTA and SESTA and everything else that we've seen legislated on these topics recently, it's hard to believe that we're headed that way. But that's why we're doing this show, and things can change for the better. So we'll keep hoping. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about relationships. I guess a lot of what we've been discussing here, soulmates and puzzle pieces and all of these kinds of things, is around black and white thinking, whether or not we see people or see relationships as they are. So what are some warning signs that we're using too much black and white thinking?
I mean, I notice it in myself when I feel really reactive and clingy and just kind of like, validate me, like complete this part of me, like, why aren't you doing this thing? Like when I get really frustrated and there's no like really good objective reason, it's usually like, I've referenced shadows before, that Jungian idea of this hurt part of you or this traumatic part of you. I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, but like that's trying to get this thing out of this person, and it's just not coming out of them because that's not who they are, and also they can't heal you. But like I notice it then, like I can feel it. I can feel this discomfort. I'm with a partner right now who brings out, shadows inside of me, and I had a lot of opportunities to be like, you're this way and I don't like it and we're not compatible, but it feels so much different. It feels like this clingy, needy kind of thing. And that's where I'm like, oh, I need to reflect on myself and what is going on inside of me, and whether this person is actually doing anything problematic or not, or whether they're just being autonomous and being themselves. And there's something that I can learn about my background and the things that I haven't healed yet. So I just look for that nasty feeling in my stomach, that clinging kind of feeling.
Yeah, this may be a little bit reductive, but a psychologist named William Glasser published a theory that basically came down to the idea that suffering comes from trying to control things that we can't, which is literally everything other than our own choices, or the attempts of others to control us. So pain in his mind, from a psychological standpoint, was trying to control other people and other people trying to control us, rather than just allowing each other to be. And so I find that when I'm in pain, it's probably a good sign that I am being a little bit black and white or a little bit controlling in those ways. Rudy, what stands out to you?
I can definitely relate to that. I have found a lot of times in my own relationship that I'm currently in that I'll find myself getting upset and thinking, like, why doesn't he do this? Why isn't he like this? And it's like, because he's not. Like, I don't like he doesn't need a reason to not be this image that I have or doing these exact things, because it's not like he's doing anything bad. It's just different from me, different from how I would have done it. And that's fine. And so it took me a while to sort of get into that mindset of realizing when I was getting upset about something that was just basically just things not going exactly the way that I wanted them to. Not bad. They weren't going bad. They just weren't exactly what I wanted. And it's like, well, that's life. Tough shit. You know, my partner isn't doing anything bad to me, and I can just express verbally, I'd really like it if you did this. But if you don't, I won't be mad, because maybe that's just not your thing.
There's a lot of nuance here, because like the last thing I want people taking away from this is when I get angry, it's my fault because they're being themselves, you know, and that therefore I need to just deal with this. So there's some nuance there that like I just want folks to keep in mind. But as an example, like the partner that I presently, an additional partner that I presently have is, there's certain things that he's done that stick out to me in the moment. And I sit there just kind of like shocked, like, what the fuck did he just do that for? Like, he'll just, you know, we'll be talking and he'll just stand up and just kind of walk away because he needed to go take care of something. Like he was thirsty, he needed to pee, whatever. And like, just no fanfare, no, hey, just a second, I need to go and pee or whatever. Like he just gets up and walks away. And like, I just sit there shocked, like, that's not how you do that. and so there's that reaction at first. And then there's that anger, like, dude, what's wrong with you? You're so selfish. Why didn't you, you know, dust me in sugar before you left? But then I am trying to approach this relationship and all relationships going forward with curiosity. And so I ask myself, what did I expect? And why should that be what is expected? So I expected him to coddle me before he left to take care of his needs. And I'm upset about that because I don't give myself permission to get up and go take care of my needs. I always sit and I stay and I wait until I feel like I have permission to take care of myself. So the things that frustrate me about my partner are the very qualities that I want to grow into. So No,
I feel like I need to call my own therapist and say, you know, I just had a revelation watching Secular Sexuality, because I relate to that a lot. This idea that the places where that we are not responsible for our own pain, but we are often causing our own pain in a lot of ways. And the fact that we are upset with our partner doesn't mean that we are responsible for that, or that we need to be apologetic or fix that or whatever else, but instead that we can notice the places where we have these expectations, and those expectations, when they are around the way that we're treated and some boundaries and some limitations on lines that we don't want crossed, are very different from when we have these like unmet demands, especially when those demands aren't being examined. So if that's one of them, what are some of the other blind spots or maybe pitfalls that you notice yourself or other people falling into?
That's a pretty broad question.
Sure.
Christy, come on.
uh,
Well, it's fair to say. I guess
I mean-
what I am getting at is that I will often find myself being like frustrated with my partner over something that hasn't actually happened, or that is like sort of a thought of what could happen, or some, preparatory anxiety. And I think that that's a real sign that I'm getting very black and white. And it's one of the blind spots that I kind of notice in my own life. Do y'all have any examples in that vein?
When my partner and I first started dating, and for maybe the first 2 years of our relationship, it was an ongoing, repeatedly coming up thing that he would assign intent to things that I said or did or didn't say or didn't do. And it was almost always malicious or manipulative intent. And that was something that we kind of had to work through. But I find that I do the same thing in smaller ways sometimes. But I think that's something that comes up for a lot of people, is you very much piggybacking off of what Marie's been saying about shadows and stuff. Like, you have your own issues, your own problems, and you start projecting that onto other people. Like, oh, you just think that you just want me to go along with what you're going to do. So you said this way to just get me to go with it and guilt me. And it's like, whoa, I was just saying what I wanted to do. I wasn't trying to guilt you at all. But if you feel like I'm guilting you, do you do that to me sometimes? Is that a thing that you do? Is that a thing that you think is like normal behavior for people, is to go around guilting each other like that? But it's not always that. Sometimes it's like trauma. Like, hey, my mom used to talk to me that way all the time, and so I kind of just expect that anytime you bring up what you want to do, you just want me to go with it. Otherwise, there's going to be an argument. It's like, no. That's not it at all. But it's I guess it's something that I think of because there's sort of the opposite of the thinking that your partner is everything and supposed to fill in all these gaps in your heart or whatever. The other side of that is that they are just gonna treat you as shittily as everybody else has ever treated you shittily, and assigning malicious intent to things that hurt you or things that might have hurt you. That's definitely a pitfall you want to stay away from. If your partner hurts you, like, tell them, ask them why they did that. Don't assume that it was to hurt you. Yeah.
And more broadly, are we talking here about story writing? Like, that's all we do all day long, is we write stories about ourselves and about other people. And so, Rudy, when you brought up the term malicious intent, it made me think about this partner that's really stretching me, is this discussion that we had about texts. And we talk about his mind and how his mind works, and he gets overwhelmed and indecisive. And whereas I'm like, let's have all the discussions, let's have it right now. And I'm texting him and I'm like, here's a question. And then in follow up to that question, this question. And if that question is true, then how about this question? And he doesn't, for the longest time, he wouldn't respond to all of my questions. He would like just maybe respond to one. And trying to be curious, I was like, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. I want to feel really insecure and be like, oh, he thinks I'm too much. He thinks I'm asking too much. He thinks I'm demanding too much. He thinks I want to talk too much. Shadows. And I was kind of thinking that I was telling that story to myself. I was trying not to, but I was telling that story to myself. And then the other night we talked and I'm like, it came up and I'm like, so he was actually telling me, he's like, so sometimes you send me a lot of questions and I get overwhelmed and I don't know which question to answer. And so I just pick one. That's
precious.
There's anxiety. There's anxiety behind him instead of malicious intent. We have these stories where we want to make someone into the enemy. We're taking these narratives from our childhood and projecting them onto other people so that we can protect ourselves. Like, this is an adaptive thing, but if we're going to learn and grow, we need to see how it might not be relevant in this situation. And so, like Rudy said, talk about it. And that's what I'm learning with this partner. There's so many things I don't understand about him, and there's all these stories that want to be written, and they make me feel very insecure. And so I tell him, you infuriate me, but it's because his behavior inflames that hurt part of me. And so what I'm learning to do is to just ask and just to say, I notice that, when I behave this way, you do this, and the story that I'm hearing in my head, talk about the story. Don't say, it's because you this. Talk about the story. I'm noticing my head and my story. The story wants to say, it's because you think I'm too much. And can you tell me what's happening on your side? And that's where you get the opportunity to see their humanity and see how they're just being human in the relationship too, and they're not an enemy. They're not trying to hurt you. Well,
not necessarily trying.
Generally speaking.
Yeah, that is my partner and I have had so many conversations that were that basically predicated on the phrase, when you do that, it makes me feel. Not assigning blame, not assigning intent, just you did this, and that's how I feel, and this is my resulting emotion in response to that. Whether that was what you intended, whether or not I'm even justified in feeling that way, or if it's my own shit in my own head that's making me feel that way and not a fault of you at all, that's how I feel about it. And those are a lot of conversations we have had to have between the two of us. And on a slightly more humorous, maybe, note, going off of that, I've also found that sometimes if you have somebody whose opinion you trust, who is outside of that relationship, sort of going to them and being like, all right, you know how sometimes your partner does something that infuriates you and you want to look for a reason to be mad? Like, you're like, I'm mad and I'm going to justify it, and he just did this and this and this. I have this one friend who always tells it to be straight. She has never sugarcoated anything in her life. Not even to me, her very best friend. And she's the person that I call and is like, all right, he said this to me, and I got pissed off. And I said some choice words, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. And she's like, no, you are not. You are not. You are not right. You need to go apologize to him. That was obviously not what he was thinking when he said that. It could have been a myriad of things, which I will list off right now. You made that assumption and you blew up. You need to go apologize to him right now. So if you have somebody like that in your life who you trust to not just automatically take your side or not sugarcoat things, just to give you an outside perspective, because sometimes you are too in your own head to, like, really, I don't know, be empathetic, which, sounds terrible, but really it's like just being able to see it from your partner's perspective of, maybe this isn't the story that my brain is writing. Sometimes that can be really hard. So
Yeah, I think that that sort of misattribution of intent is a great example of what we're talking about here, and especially in text messages. I mean, if you take nothing away from this entire conversation other than to be charitable in your interpretation of your partner's text messages, I think you'll be well on your way to a happier, healthier relationship. But I want to really hone in on something that Rudy said earlier about how oftentimes we might attribute things to malice or selfishness or whatever else, when in actuality, what we're looking at is trauma. And I think that there's real value in extending a little bit of compassion, not just to our partners, but to ourselves here, as we are on this journey to sort of root out all of this black and white thinking. I think we can get into kind of like whack-a-mole and self-assassination territory where we're like, no, don't think that way. No, don't think that way. Don't think that way. And that don't think about pink elephants type approach can really get us into trouble. And if we come in with a little bit of compassion and say, oh, wow, when I do this, it reminds you of the way your mother treated you, and that was a really difficult time. I can have feelings for that. Or, hey, when you do this thing that is absolutely not wrong or bad or evil in any kind of like spiritual or magical kind of way, but when you do it, it hurts me. It bothers me in some way. It brings up some of my own trauma, and I can have compassion for myself for sometimes being a little irrational, sometimes being a little bit emotional. Those feelings are valid, even if they are unpleasant, even if they are unhelpful, and even if they're not particularly grounded in reality.
The way that I sort of learned to handle irrational emotions like that is just from acknowledging my own phobias, because phobias are by nature pretty much always irrational, right? You
Sure.
know, you're afraid of spiders for no apparent reason. There's no venomous spiders in my area. I've never seen a venomous spider in my life. The ones that I have seen have never bitten me. I'm still afraid of them.
Mhm.
And I would never go up to somebody who has a phobia and tell them like, well, you know that's silly, right? Like you don't have to be upset about that. Just don't be upset about that. It's nothing, you know. It
Have you
exactly
tried
this,
not being a little whiny bitch? Like, it's
Right,
just a spider.
exactly.
It's fine.
but
Yeah.
apply that to other people and apply that to yourself when somebody can say, I'm feeling this way, and maybe I have no good reason to feel this way, but for whatever reason I feel this way, and it's just like, okay, I accept that is the case. Whatever we need to do to work around that, we'll do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a skill for the person that's receiving that information about, like, there's a person that's like, oh, I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling this trauma come up and blah, blah, blah. And the skill that it takes to talk about that. I think there's a skill on the other end of that we could talk about just a teeny bit, which is holding space for that trauma. And when I mean holding space, it's just allowing that to be present. And because I think the stereotypical reaction to someone saying, oh, you triggered me, you're reminding me of my mom or whatever, is defensiveness. Like they're attacking your character. They're insinuating that you're like their mother. And if we have a partner who's communicating in a healthy way about this, and if we know this information about projecting shit out and replaying all these narratives from our childhood, then it's easier for us to just open up our heart to my partner saying, dude, when you did that, it really, really hurt. And it really brought me back to this really painful time in my life. And I can sit there and not let it penetrate my identity and my worth, and just and put all of my attention onto them and what they're experiencing and seeing the pain inside of them. And then, of course, making space for any practical adjustments that need to be made, of course. But it's not about, that's a simplistic way to put it, but it's not about you in so much as, like, you don't really need to defend yourself. Just show up for the conversation, see, what potential growth is available for that dynamic. And then the second thing I wanted to say, and it was something a friend said to me, my friend Luke King, and I'm pretty sure he got it from somewhere else, but I don't remember where it was. So he's going to get this quote now, is because he was encouraging me to do this. He said, Marie, let people feel the full weight of who you are. Because sometimes I chop off my arm and throw it over there, chop off my leg, throw it over there, and say, is this okay? Like, will you accept me if I get rid of all these nasty parts? If I'm not emotional, if I don't have a reaction, if I don't have trauma that comes up, if I don't have needs, if I don't take up space, if I'm not too talkative, if I'm not too, demanding, if I don't have sensory issues, and need to go home after going on errands and shit like that, let people feel the full weight of who you fucking are. That's what I want to say. And not in a way that's like just hurt and bulldoze everybody over and be like, this is who I am. But just like allow yourself to be human,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely relate to that. As somebody who spent their teenage years cutting off chunks and then just like hiding them in a drawer to put back on later when I was around
This is
nice
fine.
people, like it's like, all right, around my family, get rid of this one and that one, and then I'll just put them back on when I go to school. Yeah, no fun. I'm so over that. That's like my life motto now is like everybody's gonna feel the full weight of me all the time. Suck it up.
Well, my next curiosity was around this idea of, okay, if we're not ones or zeros, and if we're not going to see our partner as like an angel or a demon, then how do we categorize them? How do we see them or think of them? And I feel like what I'm hearing from both of you is to see them in their entirety, their warts and all, with nothing chopped off. I mean, how close is that to the way you see this?
That's it. Yeah, that is it.
Allow them to be as complex and messy as you are. Allow them to be as ever evolving as you are. You know, like they're just as complex. They're just as confusing. They're just as human. They're just as unaware. We're all just a bunch of messes. And I think I tend to project perfection or malevolence. I make people either good or bad. Like you're good people, you're bad people, when really we are a mixture of light and dark mixed all together. And I know I keep using these wooey metaphors, but no one else has a better way of saying it, so follow me here. But like I've got darkness inside of me, I've got beauty inside of me. I am all of the things, and I don't want any partner looking at me like I'm perfect or that I'm evil or whatever. It's just we're complicated, and I think I have a history of looking towards my partner to be perfect, to be that almost like I needed to be submissive to a patriarch figure. I'm not sure where I got that from. Just kidding, I do. But like things I've been learning over my relationships is that men are just as fucked up as I am. I think being raised as a woman in this culture, I was subconsciously taught that men have it all together. They handle their feelings. They love being in control and being leaders, and they always know what's going on, and they're in charge of the dynamic and the development of the relationship, and you just need to kind of make sure that you fit within what they need. But the more I date, the more I find that men, like I mostly date men are just as emotionally complicated as I am. They cry just as much as I do. They have needs for love just as much as I do. Like, we're not dating anyone other than ourselves, really, but just with the codes, the ones and the zeros are a little bit, differently arranged, but we're really all the same. Like, I'm going to go there. Well, this is a little bit wooey, but we are all kind of the same, just on different journeys and different points.
Mm-hmm.
You said that, I flashed back to watching The Lion King 2 as a kid. There's a bit where there's two warring prides of lions, and and one of the lions is just like, look at those lions and look at these lions. We are all lions. What is the problem here? Like, what? They are us. We are them. What's the issue?
Yeah. Or like the Dr. Seuss book about the characters that have the star on the belly versus
Yes.
We've literally been
double star bellies.
We've literally been learning this shit since we were children. How do we not get it?
Yeah. By the way, thank you for recapping the plot of Lion King 2 as if that was necessary for this audience.
Right.
It's
of
a
course,
given.
We're all like low key furries because of that movie. Just like on the DL, some of us are more high key furries, but
Sure. Well, before we jump back onto the phones, I guess I wanted to just touch very briefly, Marie, with how the poly community may have something to teach us here. I want to be really mindful of not just like plucking wisdom out from the queer community to distribute to the masses, but as we're talking about allowing relationships to grow and evolve naturally rather than trying to force them into a script or onto a particular escalator, that really feels like the place to go for me. So what kind of insights do you feel like we can learn here?
Well, as the elected representative of the poly community, we have a manifesto.
I didn't get the manifesto. Somebody didn't put me in the email
Update your
group.
email address, Rudy.
Somebody put me in the
Seriously, you
email
haven't been
group.
on the list
I keep
serve.
getting the mail demons from you.
What's funny to me is that they're very much like polyamory, more so than maybe any other community, is a listserv type community.
We're very organized. Yes.
Very.
We have to be to coordinate all this stuff ethically.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the stuff I've been learning in poly, it changes year to year. I've been practicing polyamory for about 4 years. And even just the fact that I called myself polyamorous in the beginning, and now I'm like, I don't know, like ethically non-monogamous, whether I love you or not, we'll find out. Like, so that's evolved, like that whole idea. But I've dated a handful of people over the last couple of years, and each one teaches me something new about this idea of the one or of the perfect fit or any of that stuff, because I've had many different partners and they've all been very different from each other, and yet I really like all of them and have enjoyed my relationships with all of them. And I think the relationship I'm in right now, though, is especially illuminating a lot to me, like I've kind of talked about previously, in that what I want to say is being curious about a relationship and letting it unfold however it unfolds, instead of trying to guide it in a certain way, trying to make it be a certain way, just releasing control and noticing how the person is instead of waiting for them to fulfill what you hope that they're going to be, opens up so many doors to relationships you never thought that you were going to have. The partner I'm with right now, I never would have dated him in the past, because there's a very hurt part of me that is very inflamed around parts of his personality. But in poly, like I've had this opportunity to date different types, and this person I'm just approaching with curiosity, and it's illuminated who I am by being open to different people and seeing what relationships with different people do to how you see yourself. And like poly has just blown my mind wide open. This is maybe somewhat relevant, but before poly, I fucking hated myself. And I'm in the conclusion of that isn't, well, no, I fuck everyone and I think I'm great. No, that's not where that goes. How that happened is that my husband started dating someone, and lots of jealousy, so much jealousy, lots of shadows of insecurity, of not being good enough of a woman for the cishet white community of men. And so much of that came up, and I expressed a lot of curiosity towards myself. I invested a lot of time in understanding where that came from. And boom, one day, a year and a half later, yes, a year and a half of jealousy. It was painful. But a year and a half later, I looked at myself and I was like, wait, do I want to be her? Or do I actually like who I am? And I said to I finally was like, shit, I like me. And poly was that opportunity to finally project this archetype of the perfect woman onto someone else who's sleeping with my husband, and really having to look myself in the mirror and say, am I a valuable partner in this relationship? Am I a valuable person? Do I have things to contribute? Am I worthwhile? Do I like who I am, even though I don't look like this or that or this or that, and I don't act this way or that way? Poly has opened me up to loving myself. With or without my husband, with or without my partners. I know my fucking worth now because I dealt with that demon. So poly has done a lot for me. It's really revealed a lot about myself. I never intended it to be a tool for that. I just want to say I'm not trying to use people for therapy. You're like, let's see what trauma comes up when I hang out with you. But happens, and it happens to all of us, whether we know it or not, whether we're excited about it or not. I tend to be excited about it, but it does happen to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But those, I mean, I could talk about it for a very long time, but I'll just kind of keep it brief at that poly has allowed me to see myself, to see other people more deeply, and to open my mind to connections with people I never thought that I would have. And then to becoming intimate with those people, really challenging the way that my entire brain is networked. Like it's incredible. So I just can't imagine what my life would be like if I was just hanging out with one person. It would be just such a small world inside of my mind.
Love it. No, appreciate you sharing your experience with us. Show's getting a little bit long in the tooth, but I'd love to try and sneak in at least one more call before we wrap up. Rudy, who are you looking at?
Oh man, one more, only one. Well, if we're gonna do only one, let us talk to Lilith. She is calling in as a follow-up to a call that she had made a few months ago, talking about her partner's religious parents not accepting them. So let's follow up with Lilith.
Yeah, Lilith, good to hear from you again. I remember you giving us a call. How did things turn out for you?
Well, I'm happy to say that not much has changed on that front, but the big difference is now that it turns out that's not really needed.
Yeah, can you walk our listeners a little bit through your last call and about where things are now?
Sure. So last time I called, it was last year sometime. And I was calling in due to the situation with me and my partner about how we have been engaged for several years now. And she has religious parents who are very deeply religious. And they don't essentially know at all about me and her. Even though we have been together for many, many years, and it seems impossible to inform them, to include them in the relationship whatsoever, which is a little difficult because parents are very important to her. And that's I believe the gist of the call some months ago.
So where are you at now?
Yes. Right now, we are, maybe possibly thanks to the global health crisis that is going on. I hate to thank it for anything, but I believe the distancing has given a little bit of distancing from that factor. And it turns out that all of this is irrelevant. And we have essentially found each other in ways that did not seem possible at the time. I took your advices to the heart. I believe you said setting a time limit and kind of giving this hard limit of making a plan for the future as to when things are going to go down. I'm sorry, I forget who it was that said this, but that was an advice. But it turns out that was not needed whatsoever. And many of the other shows that I have watched on secular sexuality have actually been helping me and by proxy her to understand what's going on and, just bits and pieces from everywhere. And it has been very important. But we're in a very good situation right now, and I hope that it keeps going even eventually in whatever time the situation clears out and these parents might become even more involved again.
Well, I appreciate you updating us. I'm glad that you found a semblance of balance, I suppose, and that you are able to be yourself in this situation where it sounds like there's a lot of pressure to cut off parts of yourself, as we've been talking about. And I am glad to feel that you are able to be you here and that you've got permission for that.
I am very happy for that as well. I actually had many points, but all of them, every single one of the points that I had regarding this have been now addressed in this particular show already, because we are both very societally highly imperfect people. We are not the kinds of people that are easy to get along with.
Believe it or not, everybody is highly imperfect. Believe it or not.
Exactly. But the black and white thinking and all of this was already addressed here, so I'm not going to go more into these. You have already spoken everything that I already had in mind as well. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you and the whole community and everybody for being here for everybody.
No. Well, I'm glad things are going good with you and your partner, and that at the very least temporarily the parents are not an issue.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Just relieved to know that we are barking up the right tree and heading in the right direction. I appreciate you you just affirming that and for calling in.
Yes, thank you. Before I go, Christy, because I am, like I said, highly imperfect person in many ways, I just have to say this. We had an email conversation at some point. I did not respond to your latest messages. Thank you for your help on that. I'm sorry for excluding that, but I had to get that off because it bothers me.
Yeah, no worries. I want to let people know that we are available through email, sex@atheist-community.org. And I'll just go ahead and let you know, I myself as a therapist am a therapist, and I have ghosted therapists before. So I know that that's not what we're talking about here, but I want to just acknowledge that it's a pretty human response to those situations of being vulnerable and reaching out for support, to not always know how to reciprocate or how to show appreciation. And I just want to let you know that there is definitely nothing to be ashamed of there. I think that folks in the helping profession are going to recognize and understand that. And so I really just appreciate your gratitude, but also the opportunity to just kind of share that and maybe destigmatize that discomfort for everybody watching. If you have ever just gotten overwhelmed and refused to call your therapist back, or in some other way felt a little bit uncomfortable in those interactions, that's pretty human and pretty okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great night. I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
I hope all three of you have an excellent evening or night as it is. And, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Bye. Oh, what a good call to end on. Just things are working out. That's what I wanted to hear. Things are working out.
Well, yeah, we've covered a lot of ground tonight, so it's nice to know that we're going in a particular direction and that resonates with somebody. We've talked about attachment and philosophy and pseudoscience and the soul and pop culture and media, relationships, communication. I mean, all of these different things. So I guess I'm curious what sort of final thoughts you would hope to be leaving in the minds of everybody listening tonight.
Oh boy. Wrap it all up. Okay. Well, I mean, I've said it a million times, but I think my big thing is just to be curious about your relationships and about the people you're coming into contact with. And I know that we're talking about romantic, sexual types of relationships, but really that's just a microcosm of the bigger context, which is how we relate to other human beings. And so, in as much as I promote curiosity within relationships, I'm also talking about with everyone, because we all are just as complex as ourselves, and we are whole human beings, and there is no enemy. There is no perfect person. We are all just as human as you and I are. And so if we can approach each other with curiosity, which is a more like clinical way to say compassion, I think that's it opens up a lot of opportunities. And curiosity doesn't necessarily mean without boundaries, but it does allow you to see people as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that. Approach with curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I let Rudy wrap us up for the night, I guess I just wanted to take a quick moment and say thank you to Rudy as well as to Puck and everybody else who sort of stepped in at the last moment to help and make this show happen. You know, everybody that was on our crew that was working despite some pretty incredible conditions. And I want to just take a brief moment. I know that we are a international program with a giant audience from all over the world. But, you know, being that we are the atheist community of Austin, I want to just acknowledge for the folks here in Austin or in Texas that, you know, as a therapist, I have this kind of unique window into the living rooms of a lot of different people throughout the week. And I have had literally dozens of conversations this week where I've checked in with folks and said something along the lines of like, you know, how are you holding up? Like, how did you make out last week during the weather crisis that we experienced here? And almost to a person, I think everybody started off with something along the lines of, oh, well, we were among the fortunate ones. We were some of the lucky ones. You know, we only lost power for a day or two, or we only lost water for a day or two, or, you know, we kept our power and water, but we were trapped in the house. And, you know, then I kind of scratch the surface a little bit and give people an opportunity to realize this is pretty crazy stuff, that it was a really wild and difficult experience for a lot of people. And if you're listening to this and you're one of those folks that had a really challenging week last week, that felt trapped inside their home, that didn't know what was going to happen, or felt betrayed by their government or these other things, I guess I just wanted to take a moment before we wrap up tonight to acknowledge that those feelings are valid. This is a time where we're all incredibly disconnected. You're not necessarily bumping into people at you know, bars and coffee shops the way that you used to. And so in case there aren't enough people in your life telling you, I just want to let you know you're not alone for struggling with some of those emotions. And a lot of those feelings and frustrations are valid. So thank you all for giving me just a moment to touch on that issue. But I also want to thank the two of y'all for being here and putting this show together with me tonight.
It's been a blast.
I'm always nervous beforehand, but I love doing it.
Well, glad to hear it. I think that's a good sign that you'll be back around. We definitely appreciate having you here. And Rudy, having you step up into the rotation and be here much more often has been a blast. Let me hand it to you to take us out tonight.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And thank you for thanking me for being here, because I love being here. I don't know why you would thank me. I should be thanking you. But of course, both of us should really be thanking Marie, Austin Marie.
Yeah.
By the way, how can people find you, Marie? Is there possibly a picture we have with all the links that people can find you?
I don't know. Maybe I made one earlier. Oh, there it is.
Look at that.
That's so pretty.
Fabulous.
Thank you,
Amazing.
Canva. Yeah, you
Actually,
can. Yeah, you can learn about the coaching work that I do for ethical non-monogamy and religious trauma at mariedelafont.com. And then you can also listen to my podcast, Everyone's Autonomous, that addresses the after deconversion adjustments that we go through as we realize that we are human beings with animal bodies and what the hell is going on. So that's at everyone'sautonomous.com.
awesome. We also want everybody to come and join us on our Facebook Secular Sexuality fan group. That can be found at facebook.com/groups/secular sex FG. The FG stands for fan group. It's not like owned by the ACA or anything. It's by fans for fans. I'm in there all the time. Christy's in there all the time. Lots of fun discussions go on in there. And the next link that I should be talking about is our merch. I think it's our Teespring, right? Our Teespring. And the link for that is bit.ly/AEN merch. And now we've got all that, the money and the links and the stuff out of the way. We need to acknowledge the people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see the people. Let's see the crew. Let's go to the crew cam. Oh, look at those people. Look at those great people. I love those people. They're the best people. Oh my goodness. Martin set up a cat cam.
Oh man, how many cats can we fit on this internet?
Oh my goodness. He's like a little baby. Oh, he's a bitey baby. Oh, that's so good. He reminds me so much of my cat, who is also a bitey baby. Oh, that's so wonderful. That just made, like, this discussion was great, you guys, but Martin's cat really is the thing that did it for me. That made it all worth it.
We've got
Always
nothing on cats.
Leave them on a high note. Yeah.
Yep. Leave it on a high note. That is it for our show tonight. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're about to say the thing.
Speaking of high notes.
Yeah. I hope everybody in this beautiful audience gets to go and give somebody an orgasm, or, better yet, give
somebody else
give
one.
themselves. You know what I meant.
Don't tell Daryl.